The Detroit Lions have received a piece of news that nobody inside the organization wanted to hear, and it involves one of the newest members of the team before training camp has even begun. According to comments from Dan Campbell, rookie wide receiver Kendrick Law has suffered a torn ACL and will miss the entire season. Just like that, a player who was preparing to fight for a role in this offense will now be forced into a long recovery process before he ever gets the opportunity to take a regular season snap for Detroit. This is the kind of story that always hits hard because it is not just about football. For Kendrick Law, this was supposed to be the beginning of his NFL journey. Instead of preparing for training camp battles and learning his place in Ben Johnson's former system that has now evolved under the current coaching staff, he now faces months of rehabilitation. For a young player trying to establish himself in the league, that is a devastating setback. From a football perspective, the injury also removes a player that many believed could have carved out a unique role within the offense. While nobody expected Law to become a major contributor immediately, there were clear signs that his athletic profile could have been utilized in creative ways. His speed and versatility made him a candidate for jet sweeps, gadget plays, and potentially special teams duties as a return option. Those are the kinds of opportunities young players often use to earn a roster spot and prove they belong. The timing is what makes this especially frustrating. Training camp has not even started yet, and the Lions have already lost a member of their rookie class for the entire year. Fans remember similar situations in previous seasons where injuries prevented young players from gaining valuable developmental reps. Every snap matters for rookies, and unfortunately, Kendrick Law will lose an entire year of growth. The good news, if there is any positive angle to this situation, is that Detroit spent the offseason building additional depth at wide receiver. Looking back now, that strategy appears even more important. The Lions added Greg Dortch and Cedric Wilson, while also bringing in other young receivers to compete for roster positions. Dominic Lovett and Jackson Meeks remain names worth monitoring as the offseason progresses. Because of those moves, the overall impact on Detroit's offensive plans may be limited. The Lions still possess one of the strongest receiving groups they have had in recent years. Amon-Ra St. Brown remains the centerpiece of the unit. Jameson Williams continues to provide explosive playmaking ability, and there are additional receiving options throughout the roster. The tight end room also remains an important part of the passing attack. What this injury really affects is competition and depth. Instead of Kendrick Law getting an opportunity to show what he could do during camp practices and preseason games, someone else will now receive those reps. The coaching staff will have to evaluate different players in those situations and determine whether the current roster is sufficient or if another addition is needed before camp begins. Another important storyline developing around the team involves the health of several key defensive players. Dan Campbell was asked about Kerby Joseph and his recovery, but he did not provide many concrete details. According to Campbell, the organization expects to learn much more once training camp begins, and they are able to fully test the knee. That answer has naturally created some concern among fans because Joseph is one of the most important pieces of Detroit's secondary. At the same time, there have been encouraging signs elsewhere. Brian Branch has reportedly continued sharing updates from his recovery process, including videos showing intense training sessions. Reports indicate he has been pushing through demanding workouts and showing visible progress. While expectations for his return remain cautious, every positive update is important for a player that means so much to this defense. There is also optimism surrounding Aleem McNeil. Reports suggest he feels stronger and more comfortable than he has since returning from injury. Perhaps even more encouraging is his belief that last season's challenges were not only physical but also mental as he worked his way back. That confidence could become a major factor if he returns to the disruptive form that Lions fans know he is capable of producing. Meanwhile, another topic creating discussion among observers involves DJ Reed. Dan Campbell acknowledged that Reed's level of play declined after dealing with a hamstring issue, but believes he is beginning to look more comfortable again. Recent OTA observations included Jameson Williams getting behind Reed for a touchdown during practice. While that naturally caught attention, it is also important to remember that Williams has the speed to challenge virtually any defensive back in football. Still, when you combine the uncertainty surrounding injuries, the loss of Kendrick Law, the monitoring of Kerby Joseph's recovery, and the ongoing evaluations happening during offseason practices, it becomes clear that Detroit is entering a critical phase of preparation. Every practice rep, every recovery update, and every roster decision could play a significant role in shaping what this team looks like once the regular season arrives. The Lions still appear to have the depth necessary to absorb the loss of Kendrick Law from a roster standpoint, but there is no replacing the opportunity that has been taken away from the rookie himself. His focus now shifts entirely toward recovery, while the organization moves forward trying to keep the rest of the roster healthy heading into training camp. Do you think the Lions already have enough depth at wide receiver to overcome Kendrick Law's injury? Or should Detroit consider bringing in another receiver before training camp begins? What makes this situation even more interesting is that the Kendrick Law injury is only one piece of a much larger conversation taking place around the Detroit Lions right now. As disappointing as the news is, the organization cannot afford to spend much time dwelling on it because there are several other developments that could have a much bigger impact on the team's success this season. The biggest concern among many fans continues to be the status of Kerby Joseph. When Dan Campbell spoke about him, there was no dramatic announcement, no major update, and no definitive timeline. Instead, the head coach emphasized that the team will know much more once training camp begins, and the knee can be tested more extensively. That answer alone has generated plenty of discussion because Lions fans understand how valuable Joseph has become to this defense. What makes the situation difficult to evaluate is that there are conflicting signals. On one hand, Kerby Joseph has remained around the team throughout the offseason. Reports indicate he has been active around Allen Park, maintaining a positive attitude and continuing his work. Those observations naturally give supporters reason to feel optimistic. On the other hand, Campbell's cautious approach when discussing the situation leaves room for uncertainty. Until the pads come on and football activities become more intense, nobody truly knows how the recovery will translate onto the field. The Lions know they cannot afford major setbacks in the secondary. Expectations for this defense are significantly higher than they were a few years ago. Detroit is no longer viewed as a rebuilding team trying to surprise people. This is now a contender with legitimate expectations, and that means every key starter matters. That is why the updates surrounding Brian Branch have been receiving so much attention. Every new recovery video seems to generate excitement because fans are looking for signs that one of the defense's most important young players is progressing in the right direction. Recent footage reportedly showed him participating in demanding strength and conditioning work, including tire-flipping exercises that require both power and endurance. Those workouts do not guarantee a return date, but they do suggest that the recovery process is moving forward. For Lions supporters, that is exactly what they want to see. Nobody is asking for unrealistic timelines. What fans want is evidence that progress is being made, and every update appears to reinforce the belief that Branch is attacking his rehabilitation with the same intensity that made him such a valuable player on the field. Then there is Aleem McNeill, another player whose health could dramatically influence Detroit's season. According to reports, McNeill feels stronger now and more comfortable than he has since suffering his injury. Perhaps the most notable part of his comments is the suggestion that last season became as much a mental challenge as a physical one. That observation should not be overlooked. Returning from a serious injury is rarely just about rebuilding strength. Players often need time to trust their bodies again. They need confidence to move naturally, react instinctively, and perform without hesitation. If McNeill truly feels that he has moved beyond that stage, the Lions could be getting back a player capable of making a major impact along the defensive line. As all of this unfolds, another storyline continues to generate debate among fans following OTA practices. DJ Reed remains under the spotlight. Dan Campbell acknowledged that Reed's performance declined after dealing with a hamstring issue and expressed confidence that he is beginning to regain his form. However, recent practice highlights have fueled additional conversation. One of the most discussed clips reportedly showed Jameson Williams creating significant separation for a touchdown. Naturally, videos like that spread quickly because they are easy to analyze and debate. The reality, though, is probably somewhere in the middle. Jameson Williams possesses elite speed and has demonstrated throughout his career that he can challenge even talented defensive backs. A single OTA highlight is not enough to make major conclusions about a cornerback's future performance. At the same time, when fans repeatedly see clips showing a defender getting beaten, concerns are understandable. This is why training camp will be so important. The Lions are entering a period where speculation begins to give way to actual competition. Coaches will get extended looks at players. Position battles will intensify. Recovery timelines will become clearer. Questions that currently lack answers will finally start receiving them. For now, Detroit appears to be balancing optimism with caution. The roster still looks talented. The receiving core remains deep despite the loss of Kendrick Law. Key defensive players continue working toward full health. Coaches seem encouraged by several recovery processes. Yet there is also a clear understanding that nothing can be taken for granted. The next few weeks could end up determining whether the Lions enter the season with maximum momentum or with lingering questions about health and depth. Every update from Allen Park will matter because this team has reached a point where expectations are no longer about potential. Expectations are about results. The hope throughout the organization is simple: no more major injuries, continued progress from recovering players, and a healthy roster when training camp reaches full speed. If that happens, Detroit could be in position to enter the season with one of the most complete rosters they have assembled in years. There is also an important lesson that comes out of everything happening around the Lions right now, and it is something that often gets overlooked during the excitement of the offseason. Talent alone is never enough in the NFL. Every year, the teams that survive deep into the season are usually the teams that find ways to manage adversity when injuries begin to pile up. That is exactly why Detroit spent so much effort improving roster depth this offseason. When fans looked at some of the additions made at wide receiver, many questioned why the Lions kept bringing in extra competition. At the time, it seemed like the room already had plenty of established talent. Amon-Ra St. Brown was locked into his role. Jameson Williams was expected to continue ascending. Other receivers were already competing for roster spots. On paper, it looked crowded. Now, only a short time later, that extra depth suddenly looks like a smart insurance policy. The loss of Kendrick Law does not create panic because there are still multiple options available. Greg Dortch remains an intriguing piece. Cedric Wilson provides experience. Dominic Lovett continues to be a player worth monitoring. Jackson Meeks is still trying to carve out a role. There are enough bodies in the room that Detroit can continue evaluating talent without immediately feeling pressure to make an outside move. That flexibility matters. The Lions are in a much different position than they were several years ago. Back then, an injury could completely derail an entire position group because there simply were not enough capable replacements available. Today, the roster is built differently. Brad Holmes and the front office have spent years constructing layers of depth across multiple positions. That philosophy is being tested once again. The coaching staff now has an opportunity to see which players respond when additional opportunities become available. Every injury creates